A huge storm is coming to the United States over the next couple of days, and this is going to bring a bunch of problems, including a continuing risk of severe weather, with damaging winds, large hail, and tornadoes being possible. And we're also talking about a blizzard that'll be happening from the Central Plains back into the Midwest. And lastly, high winds are expected for most of the United States, with widespread wind gusts between 40 to 60 miles per hour possible today and tomorrow from the Great Plains all the way back through the East Coast. So in today's forecast, we're to break down exactly what you need to know about the weather that'll be impacting the United States over the next several days. We'll begin with what's happening across the country this morning, and we've had some severe weather rolling through parts of Oklahoma and Texas, mainly a wind threat across most of these areas overnight. This is all now moving to the east, and we are anticipating some significant severe weather later this afternoon, especially in the deep south. But overall, we are still talking about a risk of severe weather in a very large area today, and then eventually this all tracks to the East Coast tomorrow, where we now have an upgraded risk for severe weather, which we'll talk more about here in just a moment. But this storm system is going to be intensifying a lot over the next 24 hours. Our barometric pressure is forecasted to get near 977 millibars overnight tonight, which means that we will have one of the strongest low pressure systems we've ever seen in March in the United States. So this will actually be shattering records when it comes to barometric pressure in the Midwest. We still have a lot of severe weather ahead over the next couple of days, beginning with today, which is tossing trampolines on Tacos Tuesday. We do have an enhanced risk of severe weather from northeast Texas back along the Gulf Coast. This also includes southern Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama. Marginal threat of severe weather has expanded a bit further as well. It goes into now Illinois and also into eastern parts of Georgia and even into South Carolina, where damaging winds and hail will be possible. There is a tornado risk associated with all this, which I'll show you in a moment, but we have two areas we're watching for: a cold core tornado setup back up into Missouri and eastern Kansas during the afternoon, and a continuing tornado threat late this morning into the afternoon back over in the deep south. So again, the main concerns for today are damaging winds. We actually have a hatched area, which means we could see damaging winds up to 80 miles per hour back over in Louisiana and Mississippi during the late morning and early afternoon. There's a pretty good chance that we'll be live later today covering this, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel. And then eventually the tornado risk is also elevated. We have a potential for strong tornadoes in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and southern Arkansas, and there is also a low-end tornado risk which goes all the way as far north as Missouri and Kansas, and also goes as far east as Georgia and Florida. And while all this is happening today, we have an elevated risk for fires back over in Texas and New Mexico. There's an extremely critical risk, which is the highest risk that you can get, in the pink, which includes areas around Midland, Texas, and also back into parts of southern Texas near San Antonio. The relative humidity will be very low today, in addition to the winds being high, so it is a mix of basically disaster here for there to be a potential for several fires to break out later today. So make sure that you are trying your best to prevent any sort of fires from developing. The severe weather risk has also increased along the East Coast for Wednesday. We now have an enhanced risk of severe weather for Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Slight risk goes all the way back up towards Lake Erie and also into northeastern Florida. And there's also a marginal threat of severe weather in place from New Jersey, also back into parts of central Florida. Our main concern for Wednesday is damaging winds. We could actually see significant damaging winds during the very late morning into the afternoon hours on Wednesday in the Carolinas, mainly across areas like Virginia, North and South Carolina. There's also a chance for some damaging winds even as far north, again, as Lake Erie and also back into parts of central Florida. Our tornado risk for now is on the lower side of things. We have a 5% tornado risk in place back over in Virginia and the Carolinas, where a few tornadoes are possible, and then an isolated tornado or two will be possible from about Jacksonville, Florida, back into northwestern Pennsylvania. So definitely make sure you have a tornado action plan ready to go if you're in this area. Now let's talk more about the timing and the tornado risk for today, beginning with our tornado threat over the next several hours. The threat is going to be a bit lower, as most of the supercells around 9 to 10 o'clock this morning are not going to be really towering up very much. There's not enough instability, and the storms overall are not in a great environment. But I think just after lunchtime today into the early afternoon, our tornado risk will definitely exist over in central and eastern Louisiana and into southern Mississippi, where we may end up seeing a few tornadoes and possibly even a strong tornado. Greatest tornado threat today, I would say, is about 12 to about 7 o'clock this evening. I think our tornado threat will actually be the highest back over in far eastern Louisiana around New Orleans, back into far southern Mississippi right around 3 to 6 o'clock. So make sure you have a tornado action plan ready to go, and we will likely be live at some point later today, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Eventually, as we go into the overnight hours, the tornado threat is near zero, but it will increase as we go into the late morning and early afternoon, mainly in eastern North Carolina. There will also be a chance for a tornado or two even back up into West Virginia and Pennsylvania. Eventually, right around the mid to late afternoon hours, the tornado threat is dying out in North Carolina. There will still be enough wind shear and instability back up near Maryland and Virginia for a local tornado risk to transpire there, but I think it's a low-end risk. It's conditional, definitely not a slam dunk forecast by any means. And then eventually, as we go into Thursday, things are going to be clearing out with this massive storm finally moving out for most of the country. So here's the timing for the rest of today into tomorrow. Messy setup of storms right now in Oklahoma and Texas. Some damaging winds, hail, brief tornado possible over the next few hours. Eventually, as we go into the late morning, these storms will continue to move east. Very disorganized activity for most of Arkansas, but our tornado risk will be the highest right around 11 to 12 o'clock, mainly in this region. And when I say highest, it's really not that high of a tornado risk. That's just where we're talking about a potential for a tornado or two. Heavy rainfall falling in Missouri and Arkansas. Some localized flooding will be possible. As we go into the early afternoon, this is moving towards the Mississippi River Valley. I really do anticipate our greatest tornado risk today to be in eastern Louisiana and southern Mississippi. Make sure you have a tornado action plan ready to go. If we go live today, it would probably be sometime after lunchtime, so just a heads up. Eventually, as we get closer to 4 to 5 o'clock, these storms continue to move east. We're mainly watching a line of storms in Tennessee and Mississippi, which will be producing damaging winds. And then our tornado threat will be a bit more elevated back over near the Gulf Coast. And then eventually, as we go into the late evening, these storms are continuing to push towards areas like Florida and as well as Alabama. Again, still a tornado risk even through Mobile or so, right around 8 to 9 o'clock tonight. Line of storms moving into Alabama with damaging winds and even maybe a tornado or two being possible up and down the state. And then eventually, as we go into the overnight hours, this line of storms is weakening and mainly just gusty winds into Wednesday morning. And this will be moving into Florida with mostly a wind threat for those areas. And then we're going to start to see some re-intensification as we go into Wednesday afternoon back over in parts of North Carolina and Virginia. So during the morning hours on Wednesday, a line of storms will start to re-intensify in Virginia and North Carolina, mainly a wind risk. But once we start to see some clearing out in front of this line, that's when we could start to see a bit more of a tornado risk kick in right around lunchtime on Wednesday. I think the maximum tornado threat again will be really confined to the coastal regions of North Carolina around and just after lunchtime on Wednesday. And then a little further off to the north, we'll have a line of storms moving through Maryland and as well as Pennsylvania. That could bring some localized damaging winds and maybe even an isolated brief tornado. And then this line of storms will be moving offshore right around 3 to 4 o'clock. Here's your low pressure system spinning right over Indiana and Ohio. We will have a couple more storms firing up in Pennsylvania, New York, and as well as West Virginia during the mid to late afternoon. Brief tornado potential will exist out of that and some damaging winds before eventually we are done with this storm system again as we head into Thursday. And a couple other things I want to point out. We will have the potential for blizzard conditions tonight back over near Kansas City into the upper Midwest. Heavy snowfall around 9 o'clock tonight, even in western Iowa. It's going to be a quick burst of snow, but with how high the winds are going to be around this low pressure system, that is going to create the potential for blowing snow and drifting with any accumulation that ends up occurring. Again, notice how strong this low pressure system is going to be, breaking barometric records for pressure for the month of March over in the Midwest. Pretty crazy stuff there. As we go into Thursday, still some light snow remaining back over in the Midwest, and then eventually as we go into Friday, that is all moving out. And then as we go into Friday afternoon and evening, there is a chance for a little bit more light snowfall back over in the Ohio Valley. Not anticipating a winter storm as of right now. The European model even shows snow back over in Oklahoma and Texas on Sunday. Not entirely sure if we're going to see that transpire, but we'll keep you posted with the latest if anything does actually end up coming out of this. Our next video, which will likely be tomorrow morning, we'll talk all about that, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel. The amount of snowfall will not surprise you, but there will be a few inches of snow across Iowa, Minnesota, and as well as back through Wisconsin and the upper peninsula of Michigan. Most areas seeing between 2 to 5 inches of snowfall tonight into tomorrow. There will be some areas, though, as high as 6 to 12 inches of snow in far northern Wisconsin and even back up into the upper Michigan peninsula. And while all of this crazy stuff is happening, we are going to have very high wind gusts. This is around 3 o'clock this afternoon. Wind gusts between 40 to 60 miles per hour across Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, even up into South Dakota, and also out in front of the line of storms this afternoon in Arkansas and Louisiana. There will also be wind gusts as high as 50 miles per hour. We'll have some isolated power outages, blowing dust across parts of Texas, and also the potential for wildfires, unfortunately. And then eventually, as we go into tomorrow, the winds are going to continue to stay strong, even in Missouri and Iowa. Wind gusts around 30 to 50 miles per hour, in addition to the Ohio Valley. And then as we go into Thursday, the winds are mostly moving towards the East Coast. Winds again stay strong for most of the Southeast Wednesday afternoon. By the time we go into Thursday, the winds are not as strong, but we're still talking about wind gusts around 30 to 40 miles per hour across the Ohio Valley and as well as even back into the Northeast late Thursday into Friday. And as always, thank you all so much for for watching today's video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new. And don't forget, we have our 1 million subscriber merch out at shopmaxvelocity.net. We have signed hats out for a very limited time, in addition to all of our t-shirts, posters, mugs, and stickers. There's only a few more weeks to get any of this stuff, so if you want to pick it up, go check it out at shopmaxvelocity.net.